The following program is a presentation of BaseNet Internet Television.
Hello, ViewPoint listeners. This is BaseNet Internet Television national political correspondent Tony Mizuko. Hold on a minute. Ed, are you on the line?
Yeah.
I'm not continuing this show without a change to my contract. I want to be an international political correspondent. I'm global, and that comes with.
Well, you know what? Actually, you are, because we do have listeners in other countries.
Okay, so officially, I am now an international political correspondent. Remember, I have an MPA degree, which stands for a Master's in Planetary Affairs.
Okay, there you go.
So that being said, ViewPoint listeners, this is your newly minted international political correspondent with BaseNet Television, Internet Television, Tony Mizuko, coming to you with episode 8 of ViewPoint. And I'm joined here tonight, of course, with our Director of Programming for BaseNet, Ed Jupin. Ed, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, and here we are in the BaseNet TV Election Central Studios on our little mini Super Tuesday. We're 1 day shy, or 1 week shy of the real Super Tuesday.
Yeah, maybe this one we can call
we call it who?
Yeah, maybe we can call this one Two-fer Tuesday.
Two-fer Tuesday, okay.
Especially since Romney seems to have picked up both for Two-fer Tuesday. But
there we did.
I want to jump right into the coverage for everyone. And first and foremost, we're going to talk about Michigan before we talk about Arizona. It's very important. Herman Cain got over 1,000 votes in Michigan. The Herman Cain train is still going strong.
How come that's not being reported by mainstream media?
It's not. It's been reported here on BaseNet that 1,000 Herman Cain supporters, 1,000 plus.
Look at
the final
that.
totals are counted. It's probably going to be closer to 1,300 or 1,400. And I swear at one point it looked up over 2,000, and then the numbers mysteriously changed. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was some kind of a scam. But the 999
He even beat you in Michigan, huh? I hear you got like at least 1 or 2 votes in Michigan.
Yes,
He even beat you.
I did. I got about 14 votes in Michigan. All dead people that voted for me. But Herman Cain, I don't know what he came in 7th or 8th, but over 1,000 votes. So the Herman Cain train is still going strong.
Look at that.
Aside from that, Mitt Romney, there are a lot of people in Michigan, I guess, that were smitten as the night went on, and Mitt Romney did pull off a win in Michigan. Not a very decisive win, but a win. The delegate split is going to end up working 5 for Mitt and 5 for Rick Santorum, that is. So delegate-wise, there wasn't a lot at stake. And Arizona was only 29 delegates, which, again, not that much at stake. But I think what the real impact of Michigan is that Mitt is back. He is back on top as the front runner. He is back showing he can win states. Is it devastating that he only won by 4%, 5 tops? I think it's end up closer to 3 once they finally close all the polls, or once they finally fudge all their numbers. In his home state or his native state, whatever you want to call it, sure, that's a problem, and that's something that they're going to have to look into, that Romney's going to have to be aware of. But it shows that he's back on top. Now, interestingly enough, the city of Detroit, located in Wayne County, Michigan, I'm going to pull up the numbers here from everyone. Romney did win handily by about 9 to 12%, depending on which fudge numbers you look at, because I don't trust any of these elections.
He won real big in his 2 home cities or home counties, the county that he was born in and then the county that he more or less grew up in. Huge numbers, which obviously he would have had to have gotten.
Right, and I think that's understandable. I think the fact that he won in Detroit, it's interesting because you're going to have a lot of...
He got the auto workers behind him, obviously.
I mean, it's got to be that, or that even though Detroit overall is a very poor city, rich people tend to live in the cities and in the immediate suburbs of the city. Even though it's not a wealthy area, you still have a lot of executives and whatnot that live in the area. So it's possible that those are the people that are going for Romney. But it's possible that a lot of those auto workers turned out and said, you know what, we want to vote for Romney. We're not picking Santorum. Santorum still did very, very well in Michigan, and I think that's something everyone needs to understand. Romney won, but delegate-wise, it was a tie, and I think the final vote count was around 380 to 340 or 350,000 votes. So it's not as if it was a Romney trouncing, which we're going to talk about. He did do in Arizona. I don't know if Michigan's one of those states where you can say, so goes Michigan, so goes the nation, but Romney, I think, did...
You said that last week.
Yeah, he did well enough that he's back, and he's back on top, and he's the front runner.
And before we go any further into Arizona and all, and even Percy's numbers further, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow, the day after Romney Tuesday here, the Wyoming caucuses are going to post their official numbers, and it was released today that Romney did win it. That's another 29 delegates. So Wyoming, he gets 29 Wyoming delegates tomorrow.
Plus the 29 from Arizona and 5 from Michigan. So he's racking up the delegates by far. But to continue with looking at the race, again, Santorum did very well. That shows that Romney is not, he may be a front runner, but he's not a clear front runner. He doesn't have all the support in the world. Newt Gingrich did horribly, as I do what the mainstream media does and ignore Ron Paul for a minute. Newt Gingrich did horribly. He came in at about 7%. Ron Paul came in at about 12%. I think going
his average.
Gingrich is done. Ron Paul has not moved from his 12%, but it's important. I want everyone to remember that Ron Paul 10 to 12% because we're going to talk about it later on, and I think it's going to shake up the convention when the time comes. So we had Mitt and Rick in a virtual tie, although Romney did win, followed by a significant drop, and then Ron Paul, and then Gingrich. I think Gingrich is done. His time in the sun is out. Arizona, which we're going to talk about a couple things with Arizona. And the first we're going to talk about, if you actually, well, I guess I'll give Mitt Romney credit where credit's due. Romney did win Arizona handily. Newt did come in third and doubled Ron Paul's votes, and Santorum came in second. But Mitt won 48% to Santorum's 26%, to Gingrich's 16%, to Paul's 8%. So Paul averaging about 10%. Gingrich still not even averaging at 10% between the two. But Mitt Romney did beat Rick Santorum by roughly 1,000 votes. Yeah, right. And in Arizona's a winner-take-all state, so he gets all the delegates. And again, he did seem to win handily. Now, the mainstream media, both CNN and Fox, and I think NBC, they all called Arizona very early for Romney.
And they called Michigan very late.
Right. And
I have a theory.
Let's hear your theory. Of course,
the two of us were conversing separately. We weren't in the same studio during the election results all night. And my theory is that with Arizona getting called so early, your mainstream media, obviously, hey, I mean, we're in this business. We know how advertising and everything works. The mainstream media, your Foxes, CNN, so on and so forth, couldn't lose their viewerships. They had these people tied in to the election results. Well, they went and called Arizona at 9 o'clock Eastern time as soon as the polls closed out west. They couldn't afford to lose their viewers or listeners, in the case of radio, at 9 p.m. Eastern. They had to drag this on for another hour or two to keep their viewership through prime time, which generally ends at 10 p.m. And sure enough, right after 10 p.m., all of those mainstream media markets called Michigan.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and I think that's absolutely the truth of what happened, because they have called races.
They like to blame it on. I was following CNN quite a bit, and they like to blame it on just the fact of they didn't have enough statistics and it was just too tight, too close to call. Baloney.
False.
Okay,
Absolutely
forget it.
false.
Again, we keep giving our disclaimer. This is an adult show. Bullshit. I don't want to hear, this too close to call. It was already 30,000+ lead for or vote lead for Romney. He was up at that time by 5% over Santorum. There was already over 50% of the results in, but it was only after 9 p.m. on the East Coast. They just couldn't afford to have people turn off their TVs in the middle of prime time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They have called races with less information that were closer earlier than they did Michigan. And I don't believe in how early they call these races anyway. They should give it time. They should let the results come in. But, I mean, they waited. Yeah, they also, I think, proof that they screwed up. Santorum started giving a concession speech before the media had even called Michigan for him. So I think you're right. They realized they called Arizona quick, and they said, if we call Michigan, everyone's going to listen to us.
Our viewers are gone way before prime time's over, right?
Exactly, because people rarely watch the speeches afterwards. I happened to catch Rick Santorum's. It was pretty good. It got a little long, and then it got a little weird at some point. And then Romney's. Did you happen to catch Romney's, I guess you'd call it a victory speech?
I caught all of them. And going back to Santorum, there is nothing about him, non-politically speaking, that I dislike. As a person and as a speaker, I really like Santorum. I probably prefer him over Romney just as a speaker and maybe even as a person in general. So, yeah, I thought Santorum's speech was fine. A little humor here and there. And with Romney, what you see is what you've been getting for the past 20-some-odd years with Romney. Ann stole the show again. I think Ann's a great speaker.
Yeah, she definitely is. She came out a little forceful
Yep.
early on, and she she made a comment early on in in Romney's acceptance speech. She was thanking people. She said, everyone hold your applause to the end. Let's see if you can get this right. And I was like, ooh, I hope nobody takes that the wrong way, because she doesn't want to come off as Michelle Obama, but it's something that needs to happen in the campaign. You need to bring the wife out. You need to show the wife around, and she's got to have her role to play. And again, I think so far she's done that well. She's shown she can stand up on the stage and she can, roll with the punches, so to speak. And I think she's a nice lady. Again, as a fan of Rick Santorum's career for years and years, I could not be happier that he's made it this far. Maybe he'll continue to make it all the way. We still don't know. And, I mean, he's young enough that his career has a lot of places to go. But I'm very happy that the world is getting a chance to see Santorum. And I'm glad that CNN and Fox actually showed a good amount of Rick Santorum's, concession speech for these primaries, because he gave people a chance to see Rick Santorum. And I still, I think people like him that he gets a little angry and he gets a little into it, whereas Mitt's just a little too professional about it. He's too, I'm a corporate CEO, and there's nothing wrong with that, but Mitt's too boardroom.
So that leads me to ask the obvious question. We've discussed this a gazillion times over the past 8 shows. Romney Santorum, if it comes down to this.
If 30 or 60 days ago you had said to me, Tony, it's going to be Romney Santorum, I would have said, maybe, because I like to fantasize about why that would happen. Romney's going to pick a Tim Pawlenty, which would be terrible, or maybe he's going to go for a Rubio or that guy in
Which he
Virginia,
still could.
Which is still possible. But I'm actually starting to see that Santorum is an incredibly likely candidate for Romney to pick as a vice president.
And my theory, before you go on, my theory has always been, I would like to see us go back to the way we were in our founding fathers' days. The top 2 vote getters, the top 2 popular vote getters, well, sometimes the Electoral College got involved, but generally speaking, the top 2 vote getters became the president and vice president. Well, in this case, the top 2 vote getters in the primary season should get the top 2 notches in the particular party's ticket.
To an extent, I think you're right. And if you look at it, the Republican Party, for a while, really going back to the 20s or 30s, has been split between the base and the establishment. Santorum applies more to the base, more to the evangelical wing of the party, which again only came out in the 70s. It hasn't been there since the dawn of time. Romney is your establishment Republicans, your business Republicans, your country club Republicans. So you're merging both sides of the party, perhaps leaving a little bit of the libertarian wing out, but you're really bringing both sides of the party together, and you're setting up a vice president to be president, which is something you do generally want to do. Now, W didn't do that with Dick Cheney, but that's because Dick Cheney did not want to go on to be president. And he'd said that going in, he was not looking for it, and I think W said, I want a strong executive. I want somebody who I'm confident can take over. He didn't look at it as a chance to set up somebody else's political career. Now, with Romney Santorum, you could potentially have Romney followed by Santorum.
Sure, because Santorum right now is only in his early 50s. So
absolutely.
Even whether it's 4 years or 8 years from now, he's still not even 60 years old, or roughly 60 years old.
You know what I mean? I mean, he could pull a Richard Nixon. Santorum could be vice president for 8 years and then leave for 10 or 12 years and then come back.
Do that too and still be only in his 60s at that point, right?
Exactly. So I think that's much more likely, because you're going to get the two ends of the party merging together. Now, people are going to say, well, there's been a lot of bad blood. Santorum's attacked Romney on this and vice versa. But honestly, that stuff fades very quickly, because the Republicans will stop talking about it, and the president can't really use that as a point in the election. He can't say, well, I mean, he might come up in the debate, well, Rick Santorum said this, because I'll tell you what's going to happen.
These guys are human beings. I don't think politicians are any different than sports players or lawyers, for instance. Take lawyers, a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney. Man, they'll fight it out in the courtroom like they are bitter enemies, and then as soon as they walk out of that courtroom, they're going to dinner together.
No, you're absolutely right.
I don't think politicians are any different ultimately. They're just in it to win it, but they don't hate each other ultimately. I don't
Right,
think
and
so.
I think the difference between, where people might come out and say, well, Romney, Santorum has attacked Romney in this policy, that policy. What you're going to see is a convention speech by Santorum where he says, I don't agree with the governor on everything, but, you're never going to find somebody you agree with 100%. I'm going to hold him to his toes. I'm going to hold him to get it. He pledges to get rid of Obamacare. I'm going to hold him to that. And it was a fight. This is how
Please
it is.
get rid of Romney Care. We both live in Massachusetts right now.
That's true. But, so I don't think that's going to last more than a 2 or 3 day news cycle, and then it'll be done. And if you have a debate scenario, Romney could be critical of something, and he could use something that the president does, and the president could say, well, Ron, your suggestion was, disavowed by your own vice presidential candidate. But, I mean, that would be very rare. It would be sort of a cheap shot, and I don't think it's going to have an impact on the election. There's not yet enough bad blood that the two couldn't come together. And I think if you notice the way both these concession speeches went, they were both pretty nice to each other. Mm-hmm. Romney came as close to being arrogant as you can get, without actually being arrogant when he said, hey, a win's a win and we'll take it.
I thought that was a great line.
Exactly. And that's about the worst thing that he said as well, a win's a win. And it's not even arrogant. It was almost arrogant. So I think that they're already probably realizing that they might need each other. Now, that'll ultimately depend on how Super Tuesday goes. Last episode, I said the worst case scenario would be like a 4 or 5 way split on Super Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, because I was talking about how Massachusetts was so important.
Right. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I think Gingrich, going into our Super Tuesday predictions as a result of this, I think Gingrich is done. I don't think he's going to do well. I don't think Arizona's the home state of Barry Goldwater. And it was Romney, Santorum, and then Gingrich down the end. I think he is done. I think Super Tuesday night he's going to bow out, or within a day or two afterwards, because he I'm going to go off on a tangent here. He didn't, and Paul necessarily didn't as much either, but they didn't have their conventions tonight. They didn't have their speeches because they knew they weren't going to do well. They're looking forward to Super Tuesday. Newt Gingrich didn't get off his fat, diabetic-ridden ass to do anything tonight. He, took a bath. He cheated on his wife.
All of this is undocumented, of course. We just have to say.
Right. That's just my understanding of what probably happened. A very likely scenario for how Newt Gingrich's night went, because he was nowhere to be seen, because he lost pretty handily. Even he knows he can't stay in the race with numbers like that. The money's going to dry up. The support gets dried up. And the media coverage doesn't show up either. Now, Ron Paul is in a similar situation, but Ron Paul always gets between 8 and 12%. He's going to get between 8 and 12% in virtually every poll on Super Tuesday, maybe a little bit more. Now, I think after Super Tuesday, Gingrich is gone. If Santorum does well on Super Tuesday, he might stick it out thinking that he can pull the South when some of those Southern primaries come in later in the month and maybe beat Romney. But again, Santorum sort of rose up, and he did take a bit of a hit with losing both of these contests. But it depends on how badly he loses or wins Super Tuesday. If it's a trounce and Romney wins, 90% of them, I think Santorum's probably going to concede a couple days after that, because he's going to realize, Romney's just going to get the momentum from it. He's got the money already. He's going to keep getting the money. You can't keep coming in second place and win.
I think Santorum's gone before Gingrich. I'm taking Gingrich to his word, and I think he really intends on this of going all the way through.
See, I don't think he does, and I'll tell you why. I think Gingrich is a smart politician, and I think he realizes more than anyone you have to say those things like, I'm taking this to the convention, I'm going forward. I think his support has dried up quite a bit. Got proved tonight. Yeah, and but again, I'll caution that with it depends on how Super Tuesday goes. If Gingrich wins 3 states, he might say, nope, I'm taking this to the convention, ladies and gentlemen.
And there's a lot of southern states on Super Tuesday, with the exception of Virginia, with which neither him or Santorum are in.
Right, which is going to hurt the both of them.
Sure.
But I'm interested to see how Virginia turns out with Romney and with Paul.
Romney's going to break 50%.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
It's going to be 53% or something, I'll bet.
But what happens if Paul gets up to 20 or 25%? Maybe he'll get 30% because you got the other two.
I don't think that's a far cry. I see Romney at about 53%, and then Ron Paul getting 30%.
And I think that it's interesting because if Santorum and Gingrich both bow out, which I think they're both going to look to see what the other does, Newt's not going to want to bow out if it looks like Santorum is, because they're going to take votes from each other. But the momentum is on Santorum's side right now.
Hey, do you know what Newton's middle name is, by the way?
Newt,
This is a little one of Larry the Lobster's little known facts. Well, this isn't one of his facts, but I'm playing Larry the Lobster tonight.
Is this Larry the Lobster fact? Is the answer Toad?
Leroy. It's Newton Leroy Gingrich.
You know, I've read that before. What a terrible name, Newton Leroy Gingrich. I mean, Barack Hussein Obama is terrible, but I would have to say Newton Leroy Gingrich is just as bad. Gingrich's weird middle name aside, and his weird first name, I mean, who in their right mind wants to be called Newt? He should have just called himself, you know,
even just go with Newton, his real first name.
Yeah,
why use the the abbreviation slang?
You know, he's so arrogant. I'm surprised he didn't want to be called Newton, so people would think he was, like Isaac Newton.
Right.
But he's a bit of a brainiac. But I think Santorum and Gingrich are going to look to each other and try to decide what they can do. But you also got to realize that once the money stops coming in, and you almost got to think of election money and campaign money at that level as a cash business, because I guess in a sense it is. You look at your daily totals and you say, all right, we're averaging, $88,000 a day. On a good day, on a Friday when we get most of our donations, we hit $150,000. When all of a sudden you drop precipitously and you say, hey, we were raising $40,000 a day in donations, and then it went to 30, and then it went to 20, and then it went to 10, you sort of see the trend, and in a matter of 5 or 10 days, all of a sudden money really starts to dry up, and then the bills come due and you run out, and that's what causes a lot of problems with the campaigns. I think Gingrich's money is going to dry up. Santorum, not sure. But Santorum might want to bow out after Super Tuesday, endorse Romney, knowing that he's either going to get vice presidential nod. I don't know if Santorum would be interested in Secretary of State or in, Attorney General, because I think he used to be a lawyer. He might. I don't necessarily think so, but that might happen, and Gingrich might be forced to drop out because he just realizes he doesn't have the support. Going forward, if Santorum drops out and Gingrich and Romney drag on, I think Romney's just going to pounce Gingrich. Because it seemed like when the two of them really started to go head-to-head, Romney did a little bit better because Newt Gingrich is kind of an asshole. And that's a scientific fact. I think that's actually in the dictionary, that Newt Gingrich is an asshole. And I think that turns a lot of people off. And I think that you're just going to see a huge amount of people go and support Romney over Gingrich, and some of them are going to go to Paul. You're going to get some support to Gingrich, but it's just... Unfortunately, if you look at Michigan's results, which might be a little bit more indicative of some of the tougher races than Arizona, if half of Santorum's people go to Gingrich and the other half go to Paul, Romney's still beating them both. And I think that that's probably more likely how the rest of the country is going to go. So I think Gingrich is done. I think Santorum, short of a very strong showing, and I would say that Gingrich's chance of a very good showing on Super Tuesday is maybe 25%. No, I would probably say it's probably 15 to 20%. Santorum has about a 30-35% chance, maybe like 40 to show strong.
He's ahead in Ohio numbers right now, but that's before the Michigan and, specifically Michigan, since it's right next to Ohio. It was before tonight's Michigan results. Now, based upon Michigan, Ohio might not be quite as strong for Santorum anymore.
Right, I think you're right. And, we talked about Massachusetts in the last episode and how,
Same thing. I don't think... now, I'm going to retract. Last week, I thought that maybe the tide's returning and that Santorum could actually steal away Massachusetts from Romney. I don't see that anymore. I see Romney easily winning Massachusetts at this point.
I think so. Maybe not easily, but he'll win it by he'll win it. He'll definitely win it. If Santorum had won in Michigan tonight, and he had maybe done better in Arizona,
really turned the tides.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know about Romney, but even Romney, he was very poignant when he said something in his speech on Tuesday night about how he goes, the media counted us out a week ago, and now we're back. And the way he said it, or they thought we were down and out or something, you caught a glimpse that his campaign really did think that they might be on the ropes and that it might be the end.
Yeah.
And I think if Santorum had a double victory today, it probably would have been the end for Romney. But now I'm thinking, looking ahead to Super Tuesday, Romney's going to take him in Massachusetts. Ohio, so goes the nation. Romney and Santorum, I don't know. We thought that, those people in Ohio that liked Santorum were the same types in Michigan that were going to propel him, but Romney might win in Ohio. I think you've got, Virginia, which is obviously going to be Romney. But, you've got Georgia that Newt...
I still think that's going to go to Newt.
You know, it could, but I think it's still up in the air just because Newt's a jerk, and I don't think anyone likes him anymore. Maybe that's just me, but I don't think Newt's going to do that well in Georgia. Could he pick it off? Sure, but if Newt wins one of the dozen states or so, it's not going to help his career, so to speak. Idaho, Vermont. I mean, we have Wyoming. We heard actually is going to go to Romney, Tennessee. So I mean, there's some southern states that maybe it could be a Gingrich or Santorum shakeup. Because remember, Gingrich did win South Carolina, but then he lost horribly in Florida. Florida does have more establishment Republicans.
Florida's a northern state anyway, though, as we discussed back on Trifecta Tuesday.
Right, that's true. So I think that if Gingrich somehow comes out and wins Tennessee and he wins Georgia and he does real well, then sure, his campaign is there. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Romney's going to.
I see all signs pointing to Romney right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's definitely going to happen. Romney is absolutely going to pick up a majority of these states. And now I want to talk about what's going after Super Tuesday, because there is a possibility we're going to have to go after Super Tuesday for this race. Now, if Santorum or Gingrich stay in the race, coming up on the 10th and the 13th of March, between those 2 days, you do have Alabama, you have Mississippi, Missouri, which already had their caucus but doesn't award their delegates until then, and you've got Louisiana and Illinois way up north. But you've got a lot of southern states that...
Yeah, I was going to say, other than Illinois, that's an awful lot of southern states.
Right, where Gingrich or Santorum could do very well. And they could look forward to those states. The problem is a weak showing on Super Tuesday, that kills a campaign. Like I said, that money starts to dry up. People don't want to hear you speak anymore.
And that's why I don't think either of them are going anywhere.
I
just don't think that either. Gingrich, obviously, to a lesser extent. I will agree that he's going to have to pick up a few wins on Super Tuesday in the South. So Gingrich to a lesser extent. But Santorum, I think he is just still too strong in this campaign. He's got too much invested. He's, nothing invested compared to Romney dollar-wise, but he's got too much invested. He's still too strong.
He can come back, and Santorum might stick around to come back and swing some of those southern states to solidify the fact that he can either be vice president or choose the vice president. And he's going to want that clout. And several more victories in his column will give him the clout to be able to tell Romney, you need to pick me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's all going to go down to Super Tuesday. And it's funny, elections they're more like this process is more like a chess game than anything else, in the sense that one move depends on the next move, depends on the next move. A win, place, or show for Santorum. First of all, if by some chance he wins big on Super Tuesday, Mitt Romney's dead as a doornail. If Santorum comes out ahead in 8 contests, which I'm not predicting, but if that were to happen, Romney's done, gone for good. Probably not going to happen. If Santorum doesn't win a single contest, because Mitt wins them all with the exception of maybe Georgia, and then Gingrich wins that, Santorum is done. And when I say done, he's just going to drop out that night. But what happens if Santorum wins 2 contests? What happens if Santorum does win Ohio?
Nobody's going anywhere then, and this is going to drag on through April.
Right, I think you're right. Interestingly enough, I'm going to predict April 3rd is what I would call the day that if Mitt Romney hasn't won by that point, he will definitely have won or lost. So we'll know by April 3rd, and I'll tell you why. 5 primaries that day: Connecticut, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. Now, Pennsylvania might go to Rick, but those other states, they're northeastern states, they're picking Mitt Romney. Right now, hands down, those are Romney states, and that's on April 3rd. So 4 of those 5 states, Romney, I think, is going to win handily. And remember, Pennsylvania may be Rick's home state, but he's won big there, and he's lost big there. That day, if Romney wins 4 or 5 of those states, that's his crowning achievement. That's what Super Tuesday should be, but that's what April 3rd is going to be for Mitt Romney. He's going to win 4 of those 5 states. That's going to be a dynamite night for Mitt Romney. Santorum might win Pennsylvania. Gingrich is not going to win any of those states, no matter how well he does. Paul will continue with his 10%. But those are Romney states going forward.
So April 3rd could be it.
I think April 3rd is going to be anyone that hasn't dropped out by April 3rd will.
Yeah.
If Santorum shows really strongly, which, by the way, if Santorum shows strongly, Gingrich is definitely done, and the two of them are still battling it out, that'll be the day that'll determine whether or not Santorum and Romney, or I should say who goes forward. Because it's more likely that it's going to be Romney, but if Santorum wins 3 of those 5 states, Romney's done. And I know I said that about Super Tuesday, but that's showing that Rick's winning where Mitt should be winning. Now, if it gets to that point and Santorum's just sort of hanging on, but he's dropped precipitously in the polls, you're going to have a minimum of 4 out of 5 go for Romney. Probably go for Romney heavily because he's going to win the business Republicans in Connecticut, Delaware, New York, and Rhode Island. So I think that's really Mitt's, we all said New Hampshire was Mitt's firewall, and we keep pushing this back. That's really Mitt's firewall. That's where he has a likelihood to pick up quite a few states. The problem is, between the 10th and the 13th, you have quite a few southern states. You also have Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, all going to vote. Who knows where they're going to go, or if anyone's going to actually pay attention to it. That's after Super Tuesday. But I think that you're looking at, it's likely Romney, however Santorum ends up doing, is going to determine how long he sticks out. Now, that being said, that Romney's likely to win at this point, I would say. Santorum needs to show strong on Super Tuesday to stay in. Gingrich needs to show strong. I don't think he's going to, whereas Rick, it's still a toss-up. We now come to the Ron Paul factor. And I'm going to tell you why Ron Paul might have had this strategy from the very beginning and might really shake things up at the convention. We keep saying that Ron Paul consistently gets about 10% of the vote, 10 to 12%, sometimes a little bit lower, but I'd say the average is 10 to 12%. He is the one candidate whose support will not drop below 8 to 10% in a race. His people are committed. They're not going to go for another candidate. Now, here's the thing. Rick's people, Rick Santorum supporters, some of them will go for Gingrich. And they're pulling some of those blue-collar Republicans, so to speak. They'll go to Gingrich. Some of them will go to Romney. I'm somebody who likes Santorum, but I'd be okay with Romney. There's a lot of other people who would prefer Santorum, but are okay with Romney. Ron Paul supporters aren't going to go anywhere. So how about this for a hypothetical? Super Tuesday comes, Romney trounces everyone, hands down is everyone's pick for the nominee. Santorum drops out because he wants to be vice president. Gingrich drops out because he realizes he can't win, and his diabetes is probably going to get the better of him. Ron Paul is still in the race. Come March 10th and the 10th and the 13th, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 9 primaries. And then April 3rd, you've got 5 primaries. And then in May, you've got 4 primaries. And then in June, you've got 12 more, including California. Now, at that point, most of these primaries are just sort of a waste of time because the nominee's usually picked by then. But if these other people have dropped out and Ron Paul is in these primaries, he's going to start picking up more than his 10 to 12%. He's going to start getting 20 to 30% of the vote, maybe even more in some of these weirdo states. So what happens when all of a sudden you get to the convention and Mitt doesn't have the 1,100 he needs? And what happens when one Republican candidate has to go head-to-head with Ron Paul? What's the media going to do then? Are they going to ignore Ron Paul and say, oh, he's still running and this and that and whatever? Because it's going to come to convention time. If Rick or Gingrich drop out in the next 2 weeks or so, which is likely, I think you're going to see them pledge their delegates to Romney. Short of Santorum doing very, very well and Gingrich pledging his support to Santorum, but I don't think it's going to happen. All of a sudden, Romney may have to fight for Paul's 200 or 300 delegates. You may actually, I think that there are 2, looking at it now, my prediction, my thoughts on this, there are 2 likely scenarios. Mitt wins outright, or he's got to go to Paul to get the support.
Okay, but what's the backroom deal?
I think Ron Paul is a principled man who from the beginning knew he probably wouldn't win.
Oh, sure, that goes without saying.
Probably said, you know what? Here's my plan. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to take this all the way to the convention. He said it long before anyone else so that he could get to the convention and finally have his chance in the spotlight, his chance to force the Republicans to make a deal. And I think that I don't think it's going to have to do anything with somebody being vice president or secretary of state or anything like that. He's going to pull something with either the gold standard or auditing the Federal Reserve or pulling troops out of overseas. There's going to be something that Ron Paul is going to say, I will burn this convention to the ground unless you support me on this, unless you agree to this. And I think he's going to be so principled that people are going to love Ron Paul for it because he's not going to say, pick me as vice president. He's not going to say, pick my son as vice president. He's going to say, I want you to audit everything the Federal Reserve does, pledge it publicly, say it in your convention speech, sign a document, whatever it is, and we're going to go forward. Because I think he's then going to hold Romney's feet to the fire. And Romney, politically, once he agrees to whatever Paul wants, I don't think he could back out of it without really, really, I wouldn't say losing the election, but losing the election. Because here's the other thing. Paul's supporters, if he turns on them and says, turns to them, I should say, not turns on. If Ron Paul turns on his supporters and says, Mitt Romney hasn't agreed to audit the Fed, whatever, don't vote for him. Just don't vote for him because there's no difference between him and Obama. Romney's going to lose some of those supporters. Some of them are going to go vote for Romney anyway, but you're talking about an election that's likely to be decided by a couple percent. And 3% of Republican voters staying home could cost Romney the election handily. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think Paul envisioned this all along because he knew his support would stay at 8 to 10% and grow as other candidates dropped out. Because here's the other thing. Gingrich's support could possibly go to 1% or less than 1%. Santorum's support 6 months ago at 1% could drop back down to 2 or 3%. Paul's support isn't going anywhere.
No, it's not.
And I think if you look at the long-term big picture, that's why Paul says it's about the delegates, because he knows in these later races, in these dozen races that are in June that nobody thinks about.
When he's the only one last man standing next to Romney.
When he's last man standing next to Romney, that's absolutely what it's about. He's going to get half of those delegates. And all of a sudden it's, crap, Mitt needed these 400 extra delegates and he only got 200 of them. Or he could all of a sudden start winning in May and win the June caucuses in the primaries. And it could absolutely happen. I think that the reason is that he knows he can raise a certain amount of money. Not a lot of money. He does very well from his supporters, by the way, but he can't. He can raise enough that if he says, I'm staying in this race, he will raise enough money to keep traveling, to keep campaigning, to keep trying to put out ads, and to keep trying to get the media coverage. He knows he can do that, so he knows he can stick it out. Whereas somebody like Gingrich or Santorum, come June, nobody's going to be supporting them anymore if Romney's the nominee. If Romney's at 900 delegates, nobody's supporting Santorum or Gingrich, hands down. But Ron Paul's supporters will be supporting him, and he could end up having just enough delegates to prevent Romney from having, an outright win. So I think Ron Paul has seen this since the beginning as something like that, because again, I think he's a principled individual who realizes if something doesn't get done, this country really is on a precipice. And I think if you read the signs read between the lines, so to speak, read the writing on the wall, that's possibly true. And I think that's why there are a lot of conservatives who turned to Herman Cain, who turned to Newt Gingrich, who turned to Rick Santorum, because they worry. They don't think that Romney's necessarily a bad guy, but they wonder if he's going to change things enough to move things in the right direction. Or is he just going to come in, throw some regulation, change some regulations, lower a couple taxes, economy grows, and we go from there. Because the debt that we have in this country, the deficit that we have, are so huge, people are starting to say, is Romney even talking about actually addressing them? And he mentioned the debt in his Tuesday night victory speech. And it was, I wouldn't say the first time he's mentioned it, but he hasn't mentioned it recently. None of the other candidates, other than Ron Paul, of course, have really hit hard on the debt. Gingrich has come out with a couple of ideas here and there on how to pay it down. Romney, it was very interesting that he mentioned the debt for the first time in a while, I think. So I think that that's what Ron Paul's plan is. He's going to probably stick it out right up until the convention and say, I dare you to throw me out of the convention. I dare you not to pay attention to me.
I just saw a prediction that by June 26th, Romney would hit the 1144, and the rest of the prediction is that at that point, Gingrich would be up to almost 500 and Santorum only around 250. So it shows Gingrich beating Santorum 2-1 in delegates, Ron Paul down in fourth, and Romney hitting 1144 around June 26th.
If the four of them were to stay in the race?
Yep. So this prediction is going kind of along with what I was saying, that Gingrich would be the last man standing next to Ron Paul, or next, oh boy, Freudian slip, next to Romney, but with only about 500 delegates, but it projected out to Santorum only having 250.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Again, if Santorum were to drop, because his campaign is a little harder for cash, if Santorum dropped after Super Tuesday and and Gingrich stayed in, then that's a possibility. But who's Santorum going to endorse? At this point, is he going to endorse Gingrich or is he going to endorse Romney? I think he'd be more likely to endorse Romney. I don't agree with that prediction. I don't think that Gingrich is going to do that well. I think he's going to continue to drop.
See, well, these projections out were based upon pretty much giving him the southern states that are coming up.
Yeah, but some of the polls that I've seen, he's not doing as well in Georgia, his home state, as people thought.
But then again, they said Romney. As of 2 days ago, Romney was actually even projected to lose Michigan, his home state.
Right, that's true. And I'd even spoken about a week ago about how quite a few polls had Rick up in Michigan by a couple percentage points. But I guess my prediction is that Gingrich is out. Could he come back? Could we be talking a year from now about some policy of President Gingrich's? Absolutely. My prediction is that Gingrich is out. I think he's done.
I think they're all out. I think it's Romney. Now, is he going to pick somebody from outside of the primary season here as the vice president ultimately? Is he going to go outside the mix?
It depends on how strong Santorum or Gingrich's showing is on Super Tuesday. And that's really going to be the deciding factor. Because if he doesn't need the support of his cohorts in the race, then he's going to go pick whoever he wants. If he needs the support of them, because remember, Santorum could conceivably do very well on Super Tuesday and still drop out. He could say, well, we won 4 races, but we can't keep coming in second. I drop out and support Romney.
Oh, and the money's going to dry up, too.
Right. That's enough support that, Romney might need him. But if Romney does exceptionally well on Super Tuesday, if he clears it up, then he doesn't need them, and it's less likely that he will. I don't think he's going to pick a woman. And I had originally gotten excited about Condoleezza Rice because I think that would be a fantastic ticket, although Romney Rice doesn't really sound very good. And I can only imagine what kind of jokes SNL would make of that. But I don't think he's going to pick a woman. I don't think he's going to pick a minority. Some people have said maybe he will pick a Marco Rubio type person to try to win over Hispanics. But I don't think so because I think people are going to see that for what it is. Romney's biggest fear is he doesn't want to pick a Sarah Palin-like candidate that is a polarizing figure and that might actually steal some of the spotlight from him and where there's a little bit of risk. But I think on the other hand, Romney doesn't want to...
You're still not buying into my first guess of Chris Christie?
I don't see it because they're too combined. I think they're too moderate. But here's something I thought about the other day. Chris Christie for Attorney General. Why the heck not?
He was a prosecutor in Jersey.
He was a prosecutor in Jersey. He was a governor. He is an absolute great candidate for Attorney General. And you know what? Chris Christie's young enough that 4 or 8 years as Attorney General sets him up to be a president. I think that Christie's would be very hesitant to run as vice president because a Romney victory is not guaranteed. Not that a victory is ever guaranteed, but, if in polls with him matching him up with the president, if it was 70-30, then I think Christie would be like, sure. But he runs for vice president. He's not going to get reelected as governor in New Jersey. He doesn't have enough time in the state to then leave, run for vice president, come back and be like, you should reelect me as governor in New Jersey.
Well, everybody in Jersey doesn't like him anyway.
Right, and his popularity is waning in Jersey. But I think that if Romney wins, he's a perfect candidate for Attorney General. And Romney might want somebody who's tough and, big and brusque like Christie is as an Attorney General as he starts to try to tear down Obamacare and a lot of this regulation and whatnot.
That would work for me.
Yeah, and again, it just came to me a couple days ago, but I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? Chris Christie might want to be Attorney General because it's really the only cabinet position I think he'd want other than Vice President. I mean, he's not going to be Secretary of State. He's not going to be Secretary of Defense or anything like that.
And he said in the Pierce Morgan interview that he doesn't want to be second dog. He doesn't want to be Vice President. If he can't be President, he doesn't want it.
Right, and I think his personality, it probably wouldn't work for him to be vice president.
He said that. He said that to Pierce. He said, Pierce, he says, you've got to know me now. He says, do I have the personality to be vice president? He says, no, I've got to be top dog. He admits that himself.
Right, and I think that's important. Now, Attorney General isn't top dog, but you're the top Attorney General.
Exactly.
You're the top.
And that's
attorney,
what he's done. That's what he's done in his career anyway.
Exactly. So I think that's a very natural thing. I think you're seeing him potentially doing that because I think Romney's going to want somebody to probably appeal to the base. And I mean, Marco Rubio makes a lot of sense, but I don't think that Rubio is going to want to take a chance to leave a lucrative Senate career to run for vice president, even though he's got enough time before his next election.
Okay, I'm going to throw another name in there. Now, I don't know how well these guys know each other or what they think about each other. Rudy Giuliani for Attorney General.
Oh, I hadn't really thought of that. I think that's also, that might be a possibility, so to speak. Because, I think that Rudy, I don't know if he wants to get back into federal government.
I think he'd take something like Attorney General.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would. Again, it's his background. It's what he originally did before being governor. I guess it would depend on
Mayor.
how
He was never
ambitious
governor.
Romney needs that cabinet position to be. If Romney sees the attorney general as being critical to getting a lot of things done that he wants to get done.
Actually, Rudy's a better choice than Christie because Rudy's got the more proven, deeper track record in law.
Right, that's true. I think that him picking somebody like Rudy would only work if he has a lot he wants to get done.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not really looking to the attorney general for much, I don't think Rudy would want it, because Rudy would want to do something good with it.
Yep.
He would want to be the attorney general who helps
made
tear
a
down
difference,
Obamacare.
right. Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Exactly. He's going to want to be involved and active and stuff like that. And I think that Rudy's of such a status that he would take attorney general. I mean, he'd take a cabinet position, but, hey, maybe Rudy for Secretary of Homeland Defense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a possibility, too. I think I could see him doing that. I think he'd prefer Attorney General more than, one of those other positions. I'm still going with my prediction of John Huntsman for Secretary of
State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you never know. He might pick somebody like, Herman Cain might end up being Secretary of the Treasury or Secretary of the Commerce or something like that. I don't know if Cain would really want to do that because he's starting to move into his own direction. Rick Perry's not going to do anything. Bachman, God knows he's not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No, and she's running for re-election anyway now, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's definitely, it's interesting. People don't often talk about who's going to be Attorney General, but there's definitely a couple of possibilities there.
Strong names there, sure.
Yeah, and I mean, he could really put together a strong cabinet. And the thing is, he's a smart enough guy that he's going to pick a very good cabinet. And W did that. George W. Bush is an intelligent man, despite what a lot of people think. His only setback is he did have quite a few conflicting personalities. And that's the challenging thing. But when you look at Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and some of his other selections, these are all people who were very well qualified to do what they did. They did what they did very well, whether you agreed with their policies or not. They're very good managers. They're very good leaders. Again, there was quite a bit of personality clash. Romney might pick people not as personality-driven as W did, but I think he's going to do the same thing. He's going to pick a smart cabinet, but he's going to stack the areas that he's going to focus on with people that he thinks are intelligent and going to go for it. That's why if he doesn't think that Attorney General is going to do him a lot of good, he's not going to pick a Rudy Giuliani, because he's going to realize that Giuliani's not going to be interested in it if he's going to sit there and fiddle his thumbs. Same thing with a Chris Christie, although Chris Christie might turn around and say, you need to help me out. I'm dying here in New Jersey. Get me the heck out of here. Let me be Attorney General for a couple of years, and then I can go away and sort of do my own thing. I don't think Ron Paul's going for a cabinet position. As for some of the other people that are out there, the governor of Virginia, some of these others, I don't know who he's going to pick for his cabinet. It's a little too early. My only sure bet is that it's probably going to be John Huntsman for Secretary of State. That's about it. Although, because again, I think going back to the what we started on here, his vice presidential pick, I think is going to be somebody that's perceived as more conservative than him to shore up the base and to say the things that Romney doesn't want to say to a general audience. And Rick Santorum is that guy, by the way. Romney doesn't want to talk about religion because he's worried about offending people, but Santorum can go out there and do it. He doesn't want to touch on the social issues, but Santorum can go out there and do it. So we can say the campaign's focusing on it, but when he's giving his speeches and when he's giving his interviews, he's not going to want to focus on that. So that's why I think he's going to pick somebody who's more conservative than him, or at least gives the impression of being more conservative than him, to sort of be his attack dog on those issues. So that's why I don't think Christie's really going to be... That's another reason I should say I don't think he's going to pick a Christie. I hope he doesn't pick like a Tim Pawlenty. I've never really liked Tim Pawlenty for whatever reason. Not to knock the poor guy. I think that's where we're looking at for the Veep contest, so to speak. Because again, I don't think people... and there are some out there who would disagree with me on that. I don't think the vice presidential pick is as critical as people think it is. You usually have one vice presidential debate compared to 3 or 4, and the debates are never valuable as debates, but they're just a media stunt, and it's a chance for people to watch both candidates. And the economy is still going to be the biggest issue, barring some sort of a collapse or war or something like that. The economy is still going to be first in people's minds, and I think the vice presidential pick is going to slide quite a bit on that. But that's my, I guess, prediction, if you will. I have one more topic I want to comment on this evening before we go. My friend Jose, and I believe you know Jose, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
he and I were having a chat on Mitt Romney, and he brought up a good point, something that I've somewhat echoed when I talked about Romney being willing to spend his campaign money because he didn't have to look forward to, using it for anything else. But he says, whenever anyone becomes president, they're usually a little bit wealthy going into it, but sometimes not filthy rich like Mitt is. But they are still subject to corruption to a certain extent because, you become president and somebody says, well, here's X dollars for your book deal. Or when you're out of office, we'll give you X dollars for your book deal. We'll give money to this cause. We'll give X money to your campaign, and so on and so on. And he was thinking that, and he even openly said that he, perhaps he's being a little naive, but the fact that Mitt Romney has so much money, he might be less susceptible to those challenges, or I should say to those temptations, because he's not going to make money going into the White House. Or let me rephrase that. He's certainly going to be richer when he comes out as a result of his investments when he goes in, but he doesn't need to make that money. I don't know what it's like to be rich, but I would guess, the difference between being worth $160 million and $210 million is probably not very much. Probably already sort of have a lifestyle, and that's what, it is what it is. But, you look at Barack Obama, who went in probably only being worth, $1.5 million, $2 million from his book deals and all that into the White House, is going to come out wealthier, is going to be 50 or 54 years old, and is going to need to maintain a world-class lifestyle, is going to want to still be interested in making money and doing things, because again, he only gets a couple $100,000 a year afterwards as president, so he's going to need to earn a few $1,000,000 a year, and the same could be said for W, the same could be said for Bill Clinton. But whereas Romney has so much money, he's not really going to care about somebody telling him that they're going to give money to a book deal, that afterwards they're going to support him this, or they're going to set him up with a job for this. Because what a lot of these presidents and others do, they go on speaking tours. Bill Clinton went on speaking tours, and he charges $200,000 a whack. And again, he's a man.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Barack Obama will be just like Bill Clinton.
Right, and he absolutely will. And I don't think Mitt Romney wants to do that. This is really the pinnacle of his career. And he's got enough money that he doesn't need to get paid to do anything. And I don't know how long it would take him to make $200,000 with all his investments, but he could probably sit around for 8 hours and make $200,000, or fly somewhere and speak to somebody and get paid to do it. So, I would have to say that I'd agree with Jose. I think there's something to be said about a self-made man who is wealthy becoming president, because money's not going to be a concern of his. He's not going to be worried about making money. And listen, all these liberals out there, people are going to attack me on this, and they're going to call me crazy, and you're absolutely entitled to do that. But George Washington was a self-made man, and he was very wealthy too, and as a result, not tempted by, offers of money and offers of power, because he knows that when he's done, he's going back to a very nice life, and he's going to just enjoy his money and enjoy his family and his wife and all that. And I think Mitt Romney's a little bit in the same mold. He's made his money. He doesn't need to do anything to make any more money. Again, it's not like a Bill Clinton or an Obama or a W who says, oh, well, I'm worth, 3 or 5 or 10 million going into this, but after this, the book deals and this and the library, and I want to do consulting, and I'll get paid $100,000 for a 20-minute phone call. They don't have to worry about any of that. And while you're in office, when small amounts of money are dangled here and there, you're just not going to care as much. When a corporation says, hey, we're willing to give $500,000 this year if you can support us on this, Mitt Romney might yawn and say, yeah, I can give myself $500,000. and again, he said perhaps he's being a little naive, and perhaps it is, but, I think that's a good thing. It's sad that an ordinary man, so to speak, couldn't become president, but you know what? Maybe I don't want somebody who isn't as successful as Mitt Romney becoming president. Not to say that if you're just a plumber or you're an electrician, you're not as likely to make $200 million.
Well, you have to wonder if somebody that is a lot less financially well off than this current stock of candidates just wouldn't be more corrupt. If you or I, for instance, became president, and the potential, that corruptness potential was out there, I mean, not being wealthy at any point in our lives and having the opportunity to all of a sudden have your hand in the cookie jar, I think that potential to be corrupt is there. So if you already go into it as a rich man or woman, you're cutting that out.
I think you look at you or I, or you look at somebody who has an ordinary job, and you're in an office somewhere, and there's a lot of money around, and there's a quarter left over on the desk. Well, you might be likely to put that quarter in your pocket and use it at the at a candy machine or something. But you take somebody who's making $50,000 a year, and might have a temptation to, and I'm not saying that people are thieves out there or anything like that.
No,
but who might have a temptation to do it to support their family. If you took your average police officer and all of a sudden you paid them, and I'm not advocating we pay cops $400,000 a year, but you pay them $400,000 a year, they're not going to ever even really want to get free coffee or think they're not going to have that temptation. I'm not advocating. I'm not some liberal advocating we pay them a couple of $100,000 a year. But, you're right. I think that, there's something to be said about somebody where you can't corrupt them with money because they've got too much of it. They've got more than enough of it. Right. And I'm not trying to say that Barack Obama is corrupt or he's taking dirty money or anything like that. But Romney can't do that. You can't do that with Romney. I don't think anyone has enough money to offer him to, change his view or to do that. He's so wealthy that it's just not going to matter. And I think if people say, well, Mr. Romney, if you do this, we'll support the Mormon church by doing this, he might turn around and say, listen, I give him a couple $1 million a year. You want to make it worth my while, you better start giving him $20 million a year. So I think that, I would have to say I agree with Jose 110% on that.
I do as well.
We'll have to let him know to, he told me if I mentioned him in this episode to let him know where in the episode it was so we could just skip ahead and listen to it. But I'm not going to tell him. I'm going to say it's somewhere in the middle and make him listen to the whole show. But that being said, folks, I think we've come to the end of our Two for Tuesday episode covering the Michigan and Arizona primaries. We will be coming to you next week with a Super Tuesday episode.
Super Tuesday special coverage.
Super Tuesday special coverage because
we're going to have to get some fancy jingles and music and everything to play.
Oh, yeah, we'll cut in some ads and we're going to have to do a lot of things. We'll be coming to you with the results of Herman Cain and the rest of the candidates in Super Tuesday just to keep you all posted and where we're going from there. Hopefully we'll know whether or not anyone is dropping out from the race by then. Other than that, I just want to remind everyone, thank you first and foremost for listening to us here at BaseNet.
And while you're thanking people for listening, our coverage back on Trifecta Tuesday was the most listened to show ever of ViewPoint. So you folks really did enjoy our Trifecta coverage Tuesday, so that's why I think we're on to big and better things for our Super Tuesday coverage.
Speaking of corruption, we will probably be corrupt by the end of the next couple of episodes. Just kidding. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for our Super Tuesday, for our Trifecta Tuesday coverage. We want you to keep listening here at ViewPoint. And as always, you can go visit us at basenettv.com, and there's a little donate button there. You can donate as little as $1, and we'll mention you on the show. You donate $5, and we'll interview you on the show. And, if you donate $10, you can be my co-host. And you can take the show in whatever direction you want to be.
And if you donate $20,
I'll go home with you.
Okay. If you donate $20, Tony will go home with you. If you donate $50, we will donate 10 cents to the candidate of your choosing.
That sounds like a fair bargain to me. Well, once again, thank you, everyone. And again, check us out at basenettv.com. This is Tony Mizuko signing off.